He spent 205 days completely alone underground with zero access to clocks, calendars, or daylight. When his team finally brought him back to the surface, he was convinced only 2 months had passed. He was off by over 60 days. And what caused that gap reveals something unsettling about your own sense of time. His name was Michel Siffre. In the summer of 1962, he was a 23-year-old French geologist, and he had a strange idea: not to study rocks, to study himself. He climbed down into a glacier cave in the French Alps, hundreds of feet below the surface, where the temperature never rose above freezing and the darkness was total. No sunrise, no sunset, no windows, no watch. He brought a tent, a cot, canned food, and a phone line to the surface team, but he made them promise not to tell him what day or time it was. Whenever he woke up, ate, or went to sleep, he'd call up and simply say, "I'm awake," or "I'm going to sleep." His team logged the times. Siffre never saw a single one of those logs. He planned to stay 2 months. He stayed until September 14th, when his team told him it was time to come up. He didn't believe them. When he emerged into daylight, blinking, disoriented, he asked what the date was. They told him. Siffre thought they were joking. In his mind, it was mid-August. He was certain of it. He had tracked his days carefully, counting every sleep cycle, every meal, and he was wrong by nearly 2 months. This wasn't a rounding error. This was a 33% distortion in his perception of elapsed time, generated by a healthy, careful, scientifically trained adult who was actively trying to keep count. So what happened to him down there? The first thing scientists noticed once they went back through Siffre's call logs was that his sleep-wake cycle hadn't disappeared. It had drifted. Above ground, humans run on a roughly 24-hour internal clock, synced every single day by sunlight hitting your retina. Underground, with no sunlight to reset it, Siffre's body clock began running on its own private schedule. Not 24 hours, but closer to 24 and a half. Some days stretched even longer. It doesn't sound like much, but compound a 30-minute drift every single day for 205 days, and entire days quietly vanish from your internal calendar without you noticing a single one of them go. Siffre wasn't the only person this happened to. In the decades that followed, other researchers ran their own versions of his experiment. Caves in Texas, bunkers in Germany, isolation chambers built specifically to strip away every trace of daylight. The pattern repeated almost every time. Subjects consistently drifted onto longer days, and almost every subject, when finally told how much time had actually passed, underestimated it. Some by days, some, like Siffre, by nearly 2 months. Here's the detail that made scientists sit up. It wasn't only sleep that drifted, it was Siffre's actual experience of duration itself. Late in his time underground, his team asked him to perform a simple task over the phone: count to 120 at what felt to him like a normal pace of 1 count per second. It should have taken him 2 minutes. It took him 5. His internal sense of 1 second had stretched to nearly 2.5 times its normal length, and he had no idea. To him, it felt completely accurate. This is the part that should unsettle you. Your sense of time isn't a clock ticking somewhere fixed inside your skull. It's a construction built almost entirely out of external cues: sunlight, meals, other people, appointments, notifications. Strip every one of those away, and your brain doesn't just lose track, it starts inventing its own version of time, one that feels every bit as real and certain as the actual one. Siffre went back underground again in 1972, this time for 6 months in a Texas cave, wired up with more equipment than before. The same drift happened again, and by the end, something even stranger emerged in his own notes. He described periods where he simply lost hours. Entire stretches of time that, looking back, he could not account for at all. Not sleep, not memory loss in the medical sense, just gaps, as if his mind, with nothing to measure itself against, had stopped bothering to keep a continuous record at all. Researchers now have a name for part of what happened to him: circadian free running. Without daily light exposure to anchor it, the human internal clock doesn't stop. It floats. And once it floats, every other system tied to it drifts along with it. Hunger, alertness, mood, and apparently, your basic ability to perceive how much time has actually elapsed. But here's what's stranger than the science. You are running a version of this experiment on yourself right now, just a much gentler one. Modern humans, especially anyone working night shifts, staring at screens past midnight, or living through long stretches of gray winter with minimal daylight exposure, show measurable drift in the same direction Siffre's did. Studies on shift workers have found disrupted circadian rhythms linked to memory problems, mood disorders, and a documented subjective sense that time is passing strangely, too fast, too slow, or simply wrong. You've probably felt a small version of this yourself. A week with no plans and no daylight exposure that somehow felt like it lasted a month. Or the opposite. A blur of days that vanished so completely you couldn't tell anyone what you actually did with them. Siffre's body wasn't malfunctioning down there. It was doing exactly what a human body does when you remove the one input it depends on to stay anchored to reality. Without the sun resetting it daily, your internal clock isn't wrong. It's just building its own private version of time, one you have no way of checking against anything real. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If a trained scientist deliberately counting his days still lost 2 months without noticing, how much of your own life might be quietly slipping past you the exact same way, 1 degree at a time, invisible until someone finally tells you the real date? Siffre lived for decades after his experiments, and he said something in a later interview that stuck with scientists studying time perception ever since. He said that down there, in the dark, time stopped being something he measured. It became something he had to survive. And when he finally climbed back out into the sunlight, certain it was still summer, he wasn't lying. He wasn't confused. As far as his own mind was concerned, he was simply telling the truth about a version of time that no longer matched anyone else's.